Hello, families, and welcome back to a new episode. Today, I want to talk to you about how we can step into the new school year with an abundant mindset. We're going to talk about how to let go of lack and scarcity mindsets and why it is so important to feel empowered as a parent as we look forward to the next season. Now, I am a sucker for fresh starts. I love fresh starts. That's why I love the new year so much. The energy that comes when it's January and we're coming off the holidays, I think is really special. And a lot of us feel really motivated to look at past patterns and maybe just start doing things in a new way, right? And that's kind of the same energy that the new school year brings. Right now, we are just coming out of summer, of course, that for many of us is a stressful season. It's kind of, again, it reminds me of the holidays, right? Back in Christmas and New Year's times. As much as we want to have it all be rainbows and butterflies and we want to enjoy every second and really find the joy in the moments, if we're being honest, summertime can often feel really, really stressful, right? Our kids are out of their regular schedules. Many of us are juggling work and camps and trying to get the kids fed and taken care of while we do life on top of everything else. And it's just a lot. We often have travel in the mix, and vacations can be fun, but at the same time, they can be stressful when you are traveling with young kids or teenagers, if you have teenagers like me. And it's just a lot. So if you are coming out of summer feeling a little frazzled, you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your kids. You are just a normal human parent who is excited for the rhythm of the new school year. And so the fresh start that the new school year brings, whether you're a homeschooling parent or whether you send your kids to school, I think it is a wonderful opportunity to really clear the slate, so to speak, and to decide intentionally and proactively, what do we want to build out in our homes? What type of systems do we want to continue to solidify, or do we want to look at some of the systems that we might have been using? We're going to talk about the difference between classic parenting systems and what we call here at Fresh Start Family a powerful parenting system. But it is okay to look at the past and decide, I think I want to learn how to do things differently, because what I was doing in the past didn't always work so well. Maybe you weren't getting the long-term sustainable results that you wanted. And now is just the best time to start fresh. So we're going to get proactive, we're going to plan ahead, and we're going to be honest about the patterns. Now, a lot of us, as we come out of summer, as we look at the school year, we might start to look at what are some of the patterns that tend to come out when we are in the school year. So for many people, that might include morning drama, getting your kids out of the house on time. The power struggles that erupt when you're trying to get your kids dressed or trying to get them to eat breakfast or get in the car or stop fighting or touching each other on the way to school. Some of you may have kids with separation anxiety, like my little boy had his first few years of elementary school. That's stressful, right? We might fall into some patterns. We're going to talk about those patterns in a minute. Other areas of stress for many of you include bedtime drama. It's that end of the day where everyone's tired and the kids are used to like being able to stay up later, and then all of a sudden you're cracking the whip and they're going to bed at 7 p.m., but they're not happy about it, right? That can create drama, and again, we fall into patterns that we'll talk about in a minute. Homework drama. A lot of parents have homework drama with their kids where they end up trying to force them to do their homework. There's lots of tears, disconnection. And for many people, there is an after-school witching hour that happens, especially when kids are little. When Stella was in kindergarten and a little bit in first grade, my goodness, the hours after, especially those first few months of school every year, were gnarly. She would come home so grouchy, so erratic, and it was just a tough season to keep my cool. So we're going to talk about that. And then also stress often comes in the patterns of overloaded schedules and stressed parents, juggling it all and trying to get back into the rhythm, and sports practices and the upcoming holidays coming up. I know we are in September at the time of this release of this episode right now, but it's crazy to think that just around the corner, we're going to be planning for holiday trips and who's going to be hosting Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and Hanukkah, whatever it may be. So There's a lot that we're juggling, and that overwhelm and overloaded schedules and brains really can lead to stressful patterns. And what are those patterns that they lead to? So let's talk about that next. What we see commonly in homes that creates a rhythm of suffering and stable misery is things like this: threats. So often what I teach is, if you haven't quite yet expanded your parenting toolkit yet, you often inherit the classic four, which are fear, force, bribery, and rewards. So those are things that we don't need anybody to teach us. We just inherit them, right? Like I knew by the time Stella was 2 years old, I already knew, I knew way before even Stella was born, how to put a kid in timeout, right? How to bribe them, how to maybe raise my voice a little bit. I did a lot of nannying in college. I actually ran a springboard diving program where I didn't do those things. It's funny, when I showed up as a teacher in the world, I didn't have those type of behaviors, but definitely I had some of them in my nannying and then of course in my own parenting walk. But a lot of times we'll rely on the external controls to get kids to comply. So extrinsic versus intrinsic methods basically mean that you are either dangling a carrot over a child's head with bribery and rewards, or you are essentially scaring them into submission by threatening something like a consequence, a punishment. Sometimes parents will just use kind of more emotional manipulation, right? Like, don't ruin our day. Please don't be difficult. Kind of, it's more of like a shamey, guilty, guilt trip vibe. But those are what I put under the classic four. And a lot of times with those patterns that I mentioned, morning drama, bedtime drama, homework drama, sometimes kids have separation anxiety, after school witching hours, overloaded schedules, meltdowns. We will just move right into those four. And so when a challenge comes up, when a triggering situation comes up, boom, we react very, very fast with one of those four things. So threats become very, very common for families, and those are like the if-then statements, right? If you don't do your homework, then you won't get iPad time. If you touch your sister again, you will get a spanking. If-then statements really are the best clue that you are in a threat cycle. Or on the other side of that, we say that families that are often using those external controls of threats and punishment usually are also using the bribery and rewards. And remember, don't panic. If this is you right now and you're doing this and you're like, check, 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 that's what I do every day, Wendy. That's why you're here. That's why I'm so happy you're here, because I'm going to give you some different options here in a minute. But we just want to be clear and honest about what the patterns are that happen behind closed doors. So then I can help you know that there is a better way that actually works to get kids to cooperate, creates connection in the home, builds your relationship up instead of tearing it down, etc. But on the other side of threats, punishment, raising your voice, that's what I classify under the fear force bucket. The other side of that is bribery and rewards. So that means if you do your homework, you'll get candy, or if you eat your dinner, you'll get dessert, right? If you stay in your bed all night, you can watch a show in the morning. It's still kind of like a lot of if-then statements, but it's always this extrinsic reward or bribery that the parent holds over the child. It for sure doesn't come from within. The difference there is like a child learning how to stay in their bed all night so they get a full night's rest. So the next day they feel super energetic, able to behave really great at school, have fun with their friends at school, like be really strong on the monkey bars and finally make it all the way across because they took good care of their body and rested all night. That's an example of teaching an intrinsic motivation to stay in your bed all night versus extrinsic motivation is like, if you stay in your bed, you get a jelly bean in the morning, right? Which is very, very common. That's kind of the way a lot of people do it because that's what they inherited. So other patterns, I mentioned punishment. There's so many parents who just don't know what else to do. They know that they want to do different, but they don't know how to do it differently. So they're still threatening timeouts, spankings, groundings, and then often following through on those. We find that the parents, when they come to us, they often are not following through. There's a lot of empty threats. But then there are parents who follow through on that, right? But punishment is a cycle, and then revenge misbehavior often sprouts up because that is a cycle. And so kids often end up feeling hurt, disrespected, disconnected from their parents, which all feeds the revenge misbehavior cycle. So that's the behavior that's like, I hate you, this family sucks, or throwing, kicking, biting, hitting. Sometimes siblings will then end up taking it out on their siblings, especially their younger siblings, if they feel like life is unfair, that kind of stuff. And then other patterns include lack of tech boundaries. That's another one that we should have put in that comes up in a season. If parents don't get proactive with planning for the school year, the tech boundary thing, I can't believe I missed that one. That for our community here at Fresh Start Family, that is almost like the number one pain point these days, is kids that have a really hard time honoring the tech boundaries and then are very, very dysregulated when it's time to turn off the technology. And what happens is parents end up caving and just becoming very permissive with tech boundaries, or they lose their flip their lid and end up going to that like fear, force, overpowering, yelling, threatening, punishment. Fine, you're never going to have an iPad for the rest of your life. Clearly an empty threat. Normally we always give it back. But yeah, that's an exhausting cycle, right? Yelling is another pattern that happens, and that's exhausting. I was a yeller for 7 years of my parenting journey. It took me a good 7 years to stop yelling, and almost as long to stop slamming doors. So trust me, for those of you who are reactive, I am with you. You're not alone. Other patterns include hitting and harming our kids, high levels of hypocrisy in our home, where we might tell our kids like, chill out. And then as we're raising our voice with our finger in their face, or we tell them to stop hitting their siblings as we like smack their hand or spank them or threaten to spank them, right? Like clear hypocrisy is often becomes a pattern in homes. And then just general disconnection, both for parent-child, and then also what we see so much in our community is between partners, between parents. The disconnection becomes so massive when a family when they're not coming from an empowered stance, when there's disconnection with the parenting, there's a lot of misbehavior that parents are just trying to put what I would call like Band-Aid methods on. It just creates so much stress in a marriage and in the relationship with the kids. And so this is what we want to clean up. This is what we want to honestly look at and just kind of ask yourself, assess your situation. Like, okay, how's our home doing? Do we have a lot of these things right now? Maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, just honestly ask yourself, like, where do we stand with threats, bribery and rewards, punishment, revenge, misbehavior, tech boundaries and lack thereof, yelling, hitting or harming or threatening to, marriage disconnection? Do you have just a little bit of that stuff? Do you have a lot of that stuff? If you've been a student of mine for a long time, maybe you started out as having like a 9 from 1 to 10, like you had a lot of it, and now you might sit at like a 2 or a 3, which is amazing progress, right? But for those of you who hear me speak about that stuff and you realize, oh, we still have a good amount of that, and I just don't know how to do it differently, Wendy, I want you to know that you are so welcome here, and we are committed to helping you expand your parenting toolkit so you can really be at choice and have so many options that don't rely on those classic 4 things to try to make your kids comply this school year. And so in order to do that, you really want to go into the school year with an abundant mindset. So an abundant mindset is very different than a scarcity mindset. And especially when parents first find us here at Fresh Start Family, we find that a lot of people have inherited a lack mindset, which shows up in a lot of different ways. But some things that we see often come up is there's not enough time, like especially when it comes to learning how to implement powerful parenting strategies and mindsets in your home. Sometimes these strategies do take longer than screaming in your child's face and scaring them into submission, or threatening that they're not going to be able to have their iPad tonight, right? Like sometimes it does take longer to sit down, look a child in their eyes, and use our 4-step agreement setting process or 4-step Firm and Kind process that we teach in our Firm and Kind blueprint. It might take like 5 to 7 minutes to follow through on that process, whereas just like threatening a kid is going to maybe give you faster compliance, so to speak. But we know there's just such detrimental harm and long-term effects to that. And so we teach parents how to get out of that cycle. But for many parents, they come in with like, I don't got time for this. Like I am constantly like, we have so many parents, and I was in this cycle too many moons ago. Everything was a rush. It felt like my entire day was so jam-packed, even though I was a stay-at-home mom back then. It was just like one thing after another, whether it was rushing to get the kids down for a nap or getting them to preschool on time or like in the grocery store, like getting out before they had a meltdown. Like everything just felt like a rush. And looking back now, I realized that was just a dysregulated nervous system. But many parents show up with this idea that there's not enough time. A lot of parents have the thought of like, I don't have enough support. I'm doing this alone. I'm too busy. And also I'm not capable, right? Like the thought of like learning a new system and rolling out changes that are very different oftentimes than you were raised, especially if you were raised in an autocratic home. That's like the authoritarian model of like my way or the highway. If you question authority, there's going to be a big price to pay. And so doing that different can feel really scary. And we often see parents who have a scarcity mindset. It comes out in statements like, my kids never XYZ, right? Or they always, right? Or they are constantly fighting. My kids, like this one kid, especially strong-willed kids, right? We have a lot of parents who will say this particular kid nonstop pushes back, like 24/7 will push back, right? And the more we dig in, we realize, well, that's actually not true. There is moments where a kid is actually cooperating, but in our head, we will catastrophize. We will make it a always never situation. And that's just a symptom of a lack mindset, right? Lack mindsets and using the always never kind of paradigm, so to speak, will lead us into a blame and shame cycle. So a lot of times we end up, when we're sitting in these scarcity mindsets, we're thinking that our children are the ones that are driving us crazy. When really, to be honest, it's often ourselves that are driving us crazy. It's not necessarily the stimulus that is making our life crazy or so hard. It's our response to the stimulus, to our kids fighting, to our strong-willed kid pushing back like it's their freaking job. Like it is our response to that that is causing such hardship. But when we're stuck in scarcity, we will blame our children. We will blame our spouse for being non-supportive or too permissive, whatever, you name it. We will blame our upbringing, anything except for looking honestly at our contribution to the dance. And then what we find with students is sometimes when they do start to be able to look at their own contribution, they have not been supported or trained or educated yet in how to have self-compassion and see that as a strength. So they'll beat themselves up. And so this is where the shame comes in. Like, what is wrong with me? I've been trying to stop yelling for 2 years and I swore I wasn't going to yell. And it's like the first day and I literally like screamed at my kids as they got out of the car for the first day of school. Like, what's wrong with me? I should know better by now. And then I know from so much experience working with thousands of families and parents that the more you beat yourself up, the more you beat your kids up. And so if you think something's wrong with you, you're going to think something's wrong with your kids. When really, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your kids. You're just under-supported. You haven't been blessed yet with a full education and a full set of tools to help you respond versus react to the daily challenges of parenting. Okay? So how do we redirect? How do we take this awareness that maybe, just maybe, we're stuck in some reactive cycles, stuck in this lack mindset? How do we get to a more abundant mindset where we believe we are capable, that we can make time in our schedule to learn new strategies, to understand how to create that space that Viktor Frankl teaches about between stimulus and response. So we truly become at choice with how we discipline, how we redirect. How can we understand that we are capable of accomplishing anything that we set our mind to, and being able to build support networks around us, even if the closest people in our life, like our parents and our spouse, are not supportive. Like, how do we get into this abundant mindset, and how do we redirect misbehavior truly in the way that we want to? And there's a few different ways that you do that. Number one is awareness. We've already talked about the awareness part of like, hey, here's what happens in homes when a parent is undersupported or both parents are undersupported and they're in a season that is either a transition season, a stressful season, or they're raising a strong-willed kid. Many of you have all three going on. But there are three different ways, and awareness is the most important. So awareness is when you say honestly, okay, we are doing all of these things or some of these things, and I don't want to do them anymore. I don't want to live my life every day threatening my kid into submission. I want him to learn how to pick up his things because he's part of a team. I want him to learn how to be on time to school so he feels empowered and he feels like he's part of the team when he walks into the classroom and he's not late to circle time and he doesn't get embarrassed again when the teacher calls out his name and says you need to be on time, right? Like you have to want it. And becoming aware of your patterns and then deciding and declaring, okay, I want to do it differently is the most important first step. And then second, you really want to get yourself educated from a nervous system perspective of why you have those knee-jerk reactions that you have. And so for many of us, it is really strong neural pathways that we go from 0 to 60 in like a second, right? I think of like a race car. My little boy is 14, almost 15 now. And my goodness, he is so good at cars. I swear boys are like born with this ability to just know like every single car on the planet. Yesterday we were driving home and he's like, Mom, look at that. That's a Lamborghini something. It was like this pink little, it looks like a SUV, a small SUV in our town in Southern California, but I guess it's a $300,000 Lamborghini. And Taryn knows exactly what it is. And I just laughed. I'm like, I swear you guys are like born with this information in your DNA about cars. But I think of a race car and the really fast one, the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris, they can go from 0 to 60 in like, I don't know, 2 seconds or something, right? We want to be the opposite of that with misbehavior. We want to be able to slow ourselves down, signal safety to our nervous system. Remember, 99% of misbehavior is not a 4-alarm fire. And then we want to act with intention, not with reactivity. So we want to act like an EMT driver does, or an ambulance, or a firefighter, fireman, woman does when they show up to the scene of an accident. And they are there to help the person, not frantically start screaming about how there's blood everywhere and how dare this person be distracted driving. Like, no, the EMT driver takes deep breaths and they get to work and they handle the situation. And then later they talk about what went wrong, or they let the police and the investigation team talk to the person who was in the accident, right? EMT drivers, firemen, ambulance people are amazing. Volcanoes act very differently. They explode. People get hurt. They are unpredictable. They are scary. They are scary. And so we want to be the EMT driver, not the volcano in our homes. And we have the ability to be the thermometer, not the thermostat. And so we have to go first, families. We have to go first. A lot of parents really think that once their kid starts being respectful, or once their kid starts giving an attitude, then they will return that favor, so to speak. But it really doesn't work that way. A lot of times, like I'm going to say most of the time, what children learn is caught, not taught. That means we may have a blind spot, or we might have blinders on like a race horse does. But a lot of the times we actually have gone first without us even realizing it. So we have to be the ones to set the temperature in our home. When mistakes happen, when misbehavior comes along, when pushback comes our way, the way we handle that shows our children the exact way we want them to behave. And so we want to learn nervous system-wise, how can we create that space between stimulus and the response? How can we signal safety to our nervous system? And how can we really respond versus react? So we're going to be doing all of that at our free 4-day live stream event. It's called Unfrazzled. It starts on September 8th. I can't wait to tell you more about that. I'm going to share more in just a minute here. But you can save your seat and get registered. Completely free event. freshstartfamilyonline.com/unfrazzled. But we're just going to do so much work around nervous system regulation. And then the last part of this is to really head into the new school year feeling empowered,
and having this abundant mindset of I can do anything that I set my mind to, especially when it comes to creating this family legacy that I want, breaking painful generational cycles, and having this year of peace and connection and teamwork that I want in our home, you've got to have the courage to make a fresh start. Courage is what's on the other side of scared. When you feel scared that I don't have enough time, that I'm not capable of doing this, that no one around me feels like positive parenting is actually like a really good thing. Maybe you're at a church or you're in a Bible study or you have friends who have like decided to join on the bandwagon to demonize gentle parenting and swear that conscious parenting is like the reason the world is being destroyed. We have a lot of parents who don't have a ton of supportive people in their world, and they still find the courage to follow their own heart, their own intuition. As a mom, I often call that mom tuition, and educate themselves on what their options are. And so that takes courage. And in the beginning, you'll feel scared. I'm too busy to do this free 4-day class, or I don't have enough time, or this is too difficult to learn how to compassionately discipline versus punish my kids or threaten, right? We teach something called sequencing here at Fresh Start Family, which is our antidote or our alternative to threats. And it's just life-changing for parents, but it takes courage to learn a new way and then to implement that new way. And remember that when it comes to being a painful generational cycle breaker, there are so many different types of painful generational cycles, and some of them are very forward-facing, right? Like you can see it from a mile away. The parents who are caught in a pattern of like hitting and harming their kids, maybe they think it's godly, maybe they inherited that misbelief or those false teachings, or maybe they just don't think it's a big deal. So they're smacking their kid on the behind, or they're pinching or smacking hands or slapping. I once had an employee, she was like the sweetest. I love this employee so much. She hasn't worked for me in years and years and years, but she was the tiniest woman from like, I guess I won't say where she's from, but she was like so tiny and she was the sweetest woman on the planet. I loved it when she served on my team, but she had inherited a generational cycle of slapping, and she did the work to end that painful generational cycle in her home, but it took her years. And she would find herself slapping her daughters across the face at like 3 years old. And I just admired her bravery so much to be the first in her generational cycle, probably with like her mom and her grandma, who knows, maybe it was even her great grandmother too, who used that as a tactic to force submission. And she came along and she was like, she heard our message. She was like, I don't want to do that. And I'm not going to hide it anymore. I'm just going to bring it to the table and I'm going to work on it. And she did the work. She served on my team for years. She came to Freedom to Be, which is our like beautiful weekend healing program that we actually have coming up pretty soon. It's October 18th and 25th. If you want to learn more about that, this one's online, freshstartfamilyonline.com/freedom course. But we do it 2 Saturdays online from 8 to 5. We do it in person in San Diego in the spring, but in the fall we do it online so anybody from all over the world can join us. But she did Freedom to Be. She healed so many layers that were causing that like high level of reactivity, and she was just so inspirational. So that's like an outwardly facing painful generational cycle, right? We also work with clients who have really strong, like more hidden painful generational cycles. I just had a private session the other day where I was working with this sweetest mama about her painful generational cycle that had been handed down from her mom and her grandma to her, of like the harshest inner critic voice. And just a feeling of like massive judgment of oneself and others. Like that was the knee-jerk reaction. And so we really worked on that. We're continuing to work on that. But that just takes so much bravery to be able to face that and say, this is getting in my way of showing up in the way that I want to as a parent and having this connected, empowered way of leading my children and redirecting their behavior. So those are some examples of painful generational cycles that I hope that you'll find the courage to kind of look at and just think to yourself, oh, what is it that I would want to do differently, especially heading into this new school year, knowing that this is a fresh start. We can wipe the slate clean, tend to our nervous system, and really dig deep to find out, why do we get so frazzled when our kids misbehave? Okay, as Maya Angelou says, we do the best that we can. with what we know until we know better. And then when we know better, we do better. And without the education, you're just not going to be able to do better. So that's why it's so important that you actually come to an actual educational program. And that's why we offer these free educational programs multiple times a year. So you can really get an idea of what it looks like to dive into the education, to learn different strategies and tactics and mindset tweaks and ways of changing your own behavior so you can then wake up tomorrow and do it differently with your kids. So as I mentioned, our free 4-day live streaming event, Unfrazzled, it starts on September 8th. That's a Monday. We'll go Monday, Wednesday, Friday with our 1-hour free workshop, and then again the following Monday. The first day, we really cover more like awareness around how many of us were raised, that autocratic, authoritarian model that was like the most common way, still is to this day, but back then it really was like the only model for most of us. We were raised in authoritarian or autocratic homes. We talk about what a powerful parenting framework looks like and really honestly assess where we're at. And then we teach one awareness activity that you can do to start bringing loving attention to where you are feeling unsafe in your parenting journey. And we start to just teach you about how when the body feels unsafe, that is when the reactions come. And then on day 2, we start to do more education around how to see mistakes as opportunities to learn instead of like catastrophic events that mean your children are the worst or that you are a failure parent. And we start to implement what we call a stop sign or a pause button, which really does what we want to do as far as creating that space between the stimulus and the response. And then also we touch on how to discipline kids with grace and safety in a way that you actually feel united to your kids versus disconnected or creating this like sense of unsafety in your home. And then day 4, we go into Q&A. So we do implementation. I do my top 5 tips for success when it comes to implementing all that we learned during the Unfrazzled free workshop. But it's going to be so good. And I want you to come join us. Again, we start Monday. We really encourage you to be there live. We're going to have some fun giveaways every single day that we're on a live stream. And if you can't be there live, don't worry, still sign up. We'll make sure that you get the replays. And it's just going to be really powerful as a way to head into the new school year with that abundant mindset of there is enough time. I do have enough support. It's literally being provided for you in this free format right here. You do have the ability to get yourself educated. You do have the ability to get proactive and start planning ahead of time so you're not constantly like chasing your own tail, trying to clean up the messes, but instead you're getting ahead of it. And that abundant versus lack mindset will really change things for you this year. But it really takes that commitment to say, I'm ready. I'm ready to stop living in lack and instead start seeing where I have more than enough to get my family to where I want it to be. All right. I want to support you to create that family legacy of your dreams. Now with Stella being almost 18 years old and Taryn being almost 15, I just turned in the manuscript last week for the Fresh Start Your Family book. And as that came to an end, as I was wrapping and writing that last chapter, really having this culmination, this combination of 15 years now of doing this work and see it really play out in real time and then getting it all down in one place for the book was so beautiful because I got to see that 15 years ago when I first found this work, I decided that creating the family legacy of my dreams was going to be my number one commitment in life at that point. In addition to my faith, of course, in addition to my marriage, but my marriage was included in this family legacy of my dreams. My faith was included in my family legacy of my dreams, but I really did it. I made the commitment. I got the education. I invested in the mentors, and here we are 15 years later, and I am just in awe of how it worked. It actually worked, right? Like it was always such theory along the way, like, oh, I hope this works. But now that we are at the point where Stella's about to graduate from high school, she's headed off to college this next fall, having reached her dreams. She will be playing Division I beach volleyball in college for a team that's currently ranked number 9 in the nation. And that's just nuts to me. Like she went so hard, like a strong-willed child does after this dream, because of these tools, because of the nervous system regulation, because of the ability to support her and her crazy, beautiful, strong will. I think it all just contributed to her accomplishing this crazy goal. The stat for Division I college athletes, they say, is less than 1% of high school athletes make it to be in Division I sports in college. So it's just wild, and it's just cool to be at the point where I'm like, wow, we did it, Terry. We did it. We created this family legacy. Of course, we have tons to go. Now we are entering into that next season where I know Taryn's only 15, but just a few more years and he'll be an adult. And that's what I love about this work is when you invest in educating yourself around it as early as possible, it benefits you for the rest of your life, right? Like the tools that Terry and I have learned and solidified and really like built a life where we have full mastery around those relationship skills, those setting limit skills, those discipline skills, they will carry forward forever, right? Into the adult years with our kids, when they come home to visit, when we have grandkids, like it just carries forward as just such a wonderful investment. So take the time now, even if you're busy, even if it's back to school season and you have PTA meetings and you're juggling work and school and all the things. I believe in you. You can do this. Come join us, freshstartfamilyonline.com/unfrazzled. I'll see you there. Thanks for being here for this episode, and I'll see you next time.